The wind cut across the jagged cliffs like a blade, carrying the salt of the sea and the sting of winter. The Alpha King trudged forward, his cloak tattered, his crown nowhere to be seen. In his arms, the two infants stirred, tiny fingers curling against his chest. Their soft whimpers were almost drowned out by the howl of the storm, but the Alpha King did not falter. Not now. Not after everything had been taken from him. Once, he had ruled with power and precision. His voice had been law, his presence commanded respect, and his people had called him the strongest king they had ever known. But strength alone could not protect him from betrayal. The council he trusted, the advisors he had raised from boys to men, they had turned against him. The throne he had fought for, the kingdom he had bled to defend, had been ripped away. And worse, they had rejected the most sacred part of him, his children. He had been forced to flee in the dead of night, carrying the twins like fragile treasures against the chill of the forest. The trees loomed over him, black and twisted, their branches clawing at his face as if to warn him away. He did not heed their silent threats. Every step was an act of defiance, a refusal to let his family be taken from him again. The twins, though small, were alive with possibility. Their eyes, one a deep amber, the other a pale silver, flashed with light even in the shadow of the storm. The Alpha King had never felt such a weight and a gift at the same time. His pride had been stripped from him, but these children, innocent and untarnished, were a reminder of what he still had to fight for. His mind wandered back to the moment of exile. The council had accused him of failing the kingdom, of placing his personal desires above duty. They had demanded he surrender the twins, claiming their bloodline would bring ruin. He had laughed then, bitter and hollow, for they had always feared what they could not control. With his crown torn from his head and his throne stolen, he had left with only his children and the hope that some faraway place would accept them. Now, the forest stretched endlessly, a maze of frost and shadow. Wolves prowled in the distance, their eyes glinting like shards of glass, but they kept their distance. The Alpha King's presence was not one of weakness. Even in exile, the air around him carried a quiet power, a warning that death would not come without cost. Night fell quickly, the darkness swallowing the path ahead. The twins slept against his chest, their warmth seeping into him, giving him strength he did not know he had. He found a small clearing and knelt beside a frozen stream, breaking the thin ice to scoop water for the children. Each motion was careful, precise, every movement measured to ensure their safety. As he worked, a strange sound drifted through the trees. It was faint at first, a whisper of melody, like a song half-remembered from another life. The Alpha King paused, his ears straining. Wolves did not sing. Trees did not hum, and yet the music persisted, soft and tender, carrying a warmth that made the chill of the night feel less cruel. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the darkness. His instincts told him to flee, to hide, to trust no one. But something in that song called to him. It was not a threat, it was a promise, gentle, yet insistent. And as he stepped toward the sound, he noticed a figure standing just beyond the edge of the clearing. She was an Omega, as he would later realize, though there was nothing meek or timid about her presence. She radiated calm strength, her gaze steady even as the wind tugged at her dark cloak. In her arms, a lantern glowed faintly, casting soft light on the snow beneath her feet. The twins stirred, sensing the warmth of another human, and the Alpha King tightened his grip protectively. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and cautious. Every syllable carried authority, even in his weakened state. The Omega tilted her head slightly, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and compassion. "I could ask you the same," she replied, her voice soft yet firm. "You wander these woods with 2 children in the storm. They should not be alone." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. Pride warred with necessity. He was not used to accepting help, not from anyone. Yet her words carried truth he could not deny. The forest was merciless, and he was not invincible, not without the strength of the throne or the loyalty of his soldiers. "Why help us?" he asked, suspicion lingering in every tone. "Because some lives are worth saving," she said simply, stepping closer. "And these children? They are worth more than gold or crowns, worth more than any war or throne." Her certainty struck something in him he had long forgotten: hope. He had been wandering in exile, weighed down by loss and bitterness. Yet here was a stranger, willing to protect what he held most dear. Still, he could not yet trust completely. "I do not owe you anything," he said, his tone hard. "You owe no one," she replied, "but sometimes the world owes you a chance." The Alpha King studied her carefully. Her presence was not weak. It was measured, deliberate, and there was a strange warmth in her eyes that seemed to pierce through the shadows that clung to him. For the first time since his exile, he felt the pull of something other than fear or anger. Something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. Curiosity, maybe even trust. Finally, he nodded once. It was a small gesture, but it carried more weight than words. They moved together to a small hut hidden among the trees, a place shielded from the cold and from prying eyes. Inside, a fire burned softly, its warmth welcoming, though the Alpha King kept his hand on the twins, as if any moment of carelessness could undo what little safety they had found. The Omega moved with quiet efficiency, tending to the children first. She fed them warm milk and hummed a gentle tune, the same song that had led him to her. The Alpha King watched, a mix of admiration and unease churning in him. He was a king, trained to command, to protect. Yet here he was learning from a stranger how to care for those most precious to him. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft cries of the twins and the crackle of the fire. The Alpha King's pride simmered beneath his skin. He did not know this woman, and yet she had given him something he had not felt since the betrayal: relief. For a brief moment, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the hut there was a fragile sense of peace. The Omega finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "You cannot stay here forever," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "The forest is merciless. You will need more than luck to survive what is coming." The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" he asked, unease creeping into his voice. "There are forces at work," she replied, her gaze distant. "Old magic, curses tied to bloodlines. You and your children are not safe by chance. You are hunted, even if you do not see it yet." He clenched his fists. His blood roared in response, a mixture of anger and fear. "Then we fight," he said. "I will not let anyone harm them." The Omega studied him, her expression unreadable. "Strength alone will not save you," she warned. "Sometimes even the strongest must rely on another." He met her eyes, the firelight flickering in their depths. Pride warred with desperation, but beneath it all, a truth he could not deny emerged. He needed her, not just for survival, but for something deeper, something fragile and unspoken. As the night deepened, the twins slept soundly, their breaths soft against his chest. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it whispers of a world that had turned its back on him. But inside the hut, there was warmth, there was hope, and there was a connection neither the Alpha King nor the Omega could yet name. And then, just as sleep threatened to claim him, the Alpha King heard it, a rustling at the edge of the clearing, subtle but deliberate. Something, or someone, was watching. He rose quietly, placing the twins in a small cradle near the fire. The Omega followed without a word, her presence a calm counterpoint to his rising tension. Together, they stepped toward the shadows, senses sharp, hearts alert. In the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes reflected the firelight. The forest was alive, and it had not yet judged them. The Alpha King's grip tightened on the hilt of his sword. "Whatever comes," he whispered, "it will not take them from me." The Omega nodded, her hand brushing briefly against his arm. "Then we face it together," she said. And in that moment, amidst the cold, the storm, and the shadows, something fragile and powerful began to grow. A bond forged not in comfort, but in survival, trust, and the promise that even the rejected could find sanctuary. The forest waited, silent and patient, for the dawn and the trials it would bring. The first light of dawn filtered through the frost-laden trees, painting the forest in silver and gold. The Alpha King awoke with a start, the twins cooing softly in their cradle. Their tiny hands reached for him, their warmth cutting through the lingering chill of the night. He had slept little, though the Omega had kept watch silently beside the fire, her presence calm and steady like the rhythm of the earth itself. He rose slowly, muscles stiff from the cold and the long journey, and went outside to inspect the perimeter. The forest seemed calm at first, the frost glittering on every branch, but the Alpha King's instincts were never wrong. He could feel it in the subtle shift of the air, the presence of eyes watching, waiting, hidden within the trees. The Omega joined him quietly, her boots barely making a sound on the frozen ground. "You feel it too," she said softly. Her dark eyes were steady, unwavering, though a shadow of concern lingered beneath her calm. He nodded, his jaw tight. "They have found us," he said, his voice low. "Or perhaps they never truly left. Whatever follows my bloodline does not rest. It waits, patient and relentless." She studied him for a long moment, then laid a hand on his arm. "Then we prepare," she said, "together. Alone we can survive for a time, but together we can endure more than you realize." Her touch was gentle, yet it carried a weight he had never experienced. It was not command, not dominance. It was understanding, connection, and for a man who had known only power and betrayal, the sensation was both terrifying and necessary. Back inside the hut, the twins were awake, their small cries echoing softly. The Alpha King picked them up carefully, feeling the fragile pulse of life in his arms. The Omega prepared a warm meal, her movements deliberate and efficient. He watched her, noting the ease with which she moved, the way she seemed to command the space without arrogance or force. There was a quiet strength in her that unsettled him more than any sword or army ever had. "Your children are strong," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "But the world will not be gentle with them. You must teach them caution but also trust." He frowned. "Trust? After everything I've lost? After the throne, the council, the kingdom itself? How can I teach them that?" She smiled faintly, almost like a shadow of sunlight through clouds. "Because some lessons are learned not in power but in survival. They will need both." The Alpha King considered her words carefully. She spoke with the wisdom of one who had survived long winters and darker nights. Perhaps it was foolish to trust a stranger, but the twins were vulnerable. And he was exhausted from constant vigilance. He could not face the forest alone, not with enemies, visible or invisible, lurking in the shadows. They left the hut together, moving cautiously through the trees. The Omega's senses seemed attuned to the forest in ways he could not comprehend. She could hear the faintest rustle, see the faintest movement, and smell the subtle changes in the wind. He followed her lead, letting go of some of the burden of vigilance, though not entirely. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the occasional cry of a bird or the distant howl of a wolf. And then, the first real sign of danger appeared. A shadow flitted between the trees, moving with unnatural speed. The twins stirred nervously, sensing the tension. The Alpha King tensed, his hands brushing the hilt of his sword. The Omega held up a hand. "Wait," she whispered. "Do not act yet." The shadow paused, then stepped into the clearing. It was not a wolf, nor a human. Its form shimmered and twisted, dark as smoke, yet solid enough to cast a shadow in the morning light. The Alpha King's heart roared with a mix of fear and anger. He had faced enemies before, but this was different. This was not of flesh or blood. The Omega stepped forward, standing between the shadow and the twins. "You are bound by my will," she said, her voice steady, carrying an authority that made the forest itself seem to pause. "Leave them." The shadow hissed, curling like black smoke around itself, testing her words. The Alpha King took a step forward, his sword drawn. "If you harm them—" "Stop!" the Omega interrupted sharply. "We do not fight with violence first. You will not understand until you see." The shadow recoiled, then dissipated like mist in sunlight, leaving only a faint trace of cold behind. The Alpha King lowered his sword, his pulse still racing. He looked at the Omega, awe mixing with confusion. "How did you—" "I do not command force," she said, her gaze fixed on the empty space where the shadow had been. "I guide it. Some things respond only to those who understand them, not those who strike blindly." He studied her carefully, realizing that her power was unlike any he had known. She did not dominate with anger or brute strength. She shaped the world around her through knowledge, patience, and presence. And somehow she had protected the twins without so much as a strike. The Alpha King felt a stirring of respect, and something more complicated. He had never needed anyone like this, never allowed anyone to see him vulnerable. And yet, here she was, matching him in strength, guiding him in ways he had never imagined. For the next few days, they stayed in the forest, moving cautiously, hunting and gathering. The Alpha King began to notice small changes in himself. His temper softened in her presence, his constant vigilance eased slightly, and he found himself listening to her advice rather than rejecting it. He taught the twins how to grasp objects, how to recognize safe and unsafe sounds in the forest, and she taught him subtle ways to read the forest's signs, the language of survival he had never understood as a king. One night, as they sat by the fire, the Alpha King spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I have been alone so long," he said. "Even with my throne, I never felt seen. Not really." The Omega looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting the flames. "And now?" He hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "I do not know. But you make the burden feel lighter. I'm not used to this." "You never needed to be," she replied. "But that does not mean you cannot accept it." They were interrupted by a sudden movement at the edge of the clearing. The twins stirred, their small cries pulling the Alpha King and Omega to their feet. A figure emerged from the shadows, a messenger, ragged and exhausted, carrying a note sealed with wax. The Alpha King took it cautiously, breaking the seal with trembling hands. The message was brief, written in the sharp hand of a former ally. It spoke of forces gathering against him. Enemies of the kingdom who sought not only his throne, but the very life of his children. And then, a final line, almost an afterthought. "The curse stirs. Blood of the Alpha is never free." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. He looked at the Omega, whose expression remained calm but tense. "It is beginning," he said, voice low and filled with resolve. She nodded. "It has not waited for long, and it will not relent, but we will face it. Together." The Alpha King's hand brushed hers, almost unconsciously, and he felt a strange warmth in that simple contact. He realized then that his trust in her was no longer tentative. It was growing, forming roots deeper than he had expected. He had been rejected by the world, stripped of his throne, and forced into exile. Yet in this hidden forest, among shadows and frost, he had found an ally, a protector, and perhaps something even more rare, a kindred spirit. As the night deepened, the forest around them seemed to shift, alive with anticipation. The twins slept soundly, unaware of the growing danger, while the Alpha King and Omega sat close by, their hands occasionally brushing as they planned their next steps. And then, in the stillness, a sound reached them from deep within the trees, a whisper of the curse, a promise that the trials were only beginning. The Alpha King tightened his grip on his sword, the firelight reflecting in his amber eyes. The Omega placed a hand on his shoulder, calm and unyielding. Together they listened, hearts steady despite the fear. Whatever came next, they would face it. And in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, the beginnings of a bond forged in exile, danger, and shared purpose. The forest waited, patient and dark, for the dawn of the trials that would test them all, the Alpha King, his twins, and the Omega who had appeared like a light in their darkest hour. And somewhere in the shadowed trees, the first stirrings of the curse moved closer, unseen yet inevitable, carrying with it whispers of power, blood, and fate that would challenge everything the Alpha King had ever known. The forest had changed. The once familiar paths were now twisted. The trees gnarled as though the shadows themselves had grown into their bark. The Alpha King walked carefully, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. The twins slept against his chest, wrapped in blankets the Omega had made. He had grown used to her presence beside him, quiet, steady, and always watching. But the forest now demanded every ounce of vigilance they possessed. "This place is alive," he muttered, voice low, almost to himself, "and it does not welcome us." The Omega's eyes flicked to him, dark and thoughtful. "It watches, tests, and waits. It is not evil, but it does not forgive weakness, and it will show us what we are capable of." He looked at her, a mix of respect and curiosity simmering beneath the surface. "And if we fail?" "Then we learn," she replied simply, her gaze unwavering. "And we try again. You are not the same Alpha you were when you ruled the throne, and you will not face this alone." The Alpha King absorbed her words. He had always believed that strength alone defined a king. Command, force, and dominance had once been his tools. Now, walking through the shifting shadows, he realized those tools were not enough. Here, in this living forest, survival demanded patience, understanding, and, he could not say the word aloud, trust. The first sign of danger came quietly. The wind shifted, carrying with it a whisper that raised goosebumps on his skin. The twins stirred, sensing the unease. From the shadow of the trees, faint shapes began to emerge, figures of smoke and darkness, twisting forms that flickered like dying embers. The Alpha King's sword was in his hand before he fully realized it. "They are close," he said, voice steady despite the adrenaline racing through him. The Omega stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture that seemed both protective and commanding. "Do not strike unless necessary," she warned. "Let me guide them first." The shapes hesitated, as if sensing her power, and then surged forward. The Alpha King could feel the cold pressure of the curse, a presence that clawed at the edges of reality itself. One shadow lunged toward the twins, and the Alpha King's heart leapt. He struck instinctively, his sword cutting through nothing, the shadow dispersing only to reassemble moments later. The Omega moved like a current of calm energy. She whispered words he could not understand, hands weaving through the air, and the shadows shuddered, recoiling. One by one, they dissipated, but not entirely. A lingering sense of danger remained, heavy and unyielding. "You see," she said, voice low, "strength alone does not defeat this. You must understand it, not fight it blindly." The Alpha King lowered his sword, breathing hard. "Then teach me," he said, a strange mix of humility and determination in his tone. "I have ruled kingdoms and fought wars, but this is something else entirely." She nodded. "Then you will learn, and the twins will learn too. There is power in them, power tied to the blood you carry. You must protect it, nurture it, and guide it. Only then will the curse be faced on equal terms." Over the following days, they trained together in silence and observation. The Omega taught the Alpha King how to sense the forest, how to anticipate the shadows, and how to channel his anger into calm control. He taught the twins to respond to subtle signals, sounds, lights, the shifting of the wind, preparing them for a world that would not be gentle. During these lessons, a bond began to form. Fragile, yet undeniable. The Alpha King, who had once trusted only his own strength, found himself relying on her wisdom. And the Omega, who had lived among the shadows and dangers of the forest for years, found herself drawn to the fire and warmth that lingered around him despite the cold of exile. One night, after the twins had been tucked into a secure cradle, the Alpha King and the Omega stood by the fire. The wind carried whispers of the curse, small tendrils of shadow that reached for the light, but could not cross it. He watched her as she moved, her hands adjusting the blankets, her eyes scanning the forest, alert yet calm. "You are different now," she said, breaking the silence. "Exile has changed you, but not broken you. You are still strong, but now you are more than that. You are wise, patient, and capable of love that you once denied yourself." He looked at her, startled by the truth in her words. "Love, I am not sure I know that anymore," he admitted quietly. "I have been alone so long, betrayed, rejected. How can I allow myself—" "You already have," she interrupted softly, stepping closer. "Every choice you make to protect the twins, every moment you trust me, every breath you spend here, that is love. You just do not name it yet." The Alpha King's hand brushed hers unconsciously, and he felt a warmth that had nothing to do with fire. He pulled back slightly, uncertain, yet unwilling to let go. There was something in her presence that anchored him, something stronger than pride, stronger than fear. And as much as he fought it, he realized he did not want to fight it anymore. The serenity of the night was shattered by a sudden chilling howl from deep within the forest. The twins stirred, alarmed. The Alpha King was on his feet in an instant, sword drawn, his senses sharp. The Omega followed, calm and focused, eyes scanning the shadows. From the darkness a new threat emerged, larger, more deliberate, more menacing than before. It was a creature of smoke and shadow, but its shape was distinct, more defined, as if it were formed with purpose. It moved with intent, circling the clearing like a predator, eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. "It is testing us," the Omega said, her voice low. "It knows your power. It wants to measure it. And it knows the twins are here." The Alpha King felt a surge of protective fury. "Then it will find nothing but death if it touches them." "No," the Omega said firmly, "not death yet. This is a lesson. Observe, respond, adapt." The creature lunged, faster than he could strike. The Alpha King's instincts kicked in, but the Omega stepped forward, hands raised, voice chanting in a language older than the forest itself. The shadow hesitated, then recoiled, writhing and twisting as if resisting her control. The Alpha King watched in awe as she guided the force with precision, bending its movements without touching it. He realized then that true power was not in dominance or brute strength. It was in understanding, in harmony with the world around you. He moved closer, allowing her to lead, supporting with his own strength when needed. Together, they faced the shadow, blending his raw power with her mastery of control. Slowly, deliberately, they forced the creature back, away from the twins, until it finally dispersed, leaving only the faintest trace of cold behind. Breathing heavily, the Alpha King sheathed his sword. He looked at the Omega, gratitude and something deeper shining in his amber eyes. I understand now, he said, voice low. Strength is not everything. Not here. Not with them. She nodded, her expression softening. And understanding is only the beginning. You will face more than shadows. You will face the past, the betrayal, and the prophecy tied to your bloodline. But together, you will endure. You will rise stronger than before. The Alpha King reached out, taking her hand this time, holding it firmly but gently. Together, he echoed. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a fragile peace in the clearing. The twins slept soundly, their breaths even and warm. The fire crackled softly, casting golden light over the forest floor. And in the distance, hidden within the twisting trees, something watched and waited. A presence ancient, patient, and far from defeated. The Alpha King and the Omega knew that this peace was temporary. The curse would test them again in ways they could not yet imagine. But for now, they had each other, and they had the twins. And that was enough to face the darkness to come. As the first hints of dawn painted the sky, the Alpha King whispered to the sleeping children, "We will protect you. Always. No matter what comes." The Omega pressed close, her hand on his shoulder, a silent promise that they would face it all together. And somewhere deep in the forest, the whisper of the curse stirred again, carrying with it the inevitability of trials, choices, and the awakening of powers the Alpha King had yet to understand. The forest waited, patient and watchful. As the exile, the Omega, and the twins prepared for what destiny had set in motion. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light across the frost-laden forest. Yet the Alpha King felt its warmth as a distant memory. The forest was alive with whispers and shadows, the lingering effects of the curse they had felt since their exile. The twins slept peacefully in the cradle the Omega had made, unaware of the danger that approached with quiet inevitability. The Alpha King stood near the edge of the clearing, his amber eyes scanning the trees, muscles tense, sword in hand. The Omega moved beside him, calm yet alert, her hands ready to guide, to protect, to act. They had grown together in this exile, in danger and uncertainty, learning the delicate balance between strength and trust. Now, everything would be tested. A deep, low rumble echoed through the forest. The trees shivered as shadows coalesced into a form far larger and more menacing than anything they had encountered before. The curse had taken shape, feeding on anger, fear, and the bloodline of the Alpha King. Its presence was overwhelming, pressing on their senses, but the Omega's calm energy anchored him. "It is the heart of it," she whispered, "the core of the curse. It has waited for you to grow, for your power to awaken fully, and now it comes." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. "Then we face it. Together." The shadows surged forward, twisting and writhing, their shapes forming sharp edges and shifting faces. The twins stirred, sensing the tension. The Alpha King knelt beside them, feeling the fragile warmth of their skin, and swore silently that nothing would touch them. Not betrayal, not curses, not the darkness itself. The Omega stepped forward, her voice rising in a chant that seemed older than the forest. Light began to shimmer faintly around her, soft yet unyielding. The Alpha King drew a deep breath, feeling the fire of his bloodline respond. His strength, tempered by exile and tempered by trust in her, surged through him. This was no longer a fight he could face alone. It was a challenge that demanded unity. The curse struck first, a wave of darkness crashing toward them like a living storm. The Alpha King met it with a roar, his sword swinging in arcs that cut through shadows, though they reformed almost immediately. The Omega's hands moved with precision, weaving light and words into patterns that bound, restrained, and guided the darkness. It was a battle of endurance, of mind and heart as much as strength. The Alpha King realized something vital. He could not destroy this force with anger or rage. He had to accept it, confront it, and assert the will to protect those he loved. His power, once raw and uncontrolled, now flowed with purpose, synchronized with the Omega's guidance. The twins cried out suddenly, sensing the climax of the battle. The Alpha King rushed to their side, holding them close, but the Omega moved faster, creating a shield of light that wrapped around them. For the first time, he saw the full scope of her abilities. She did not merely fight the curse, she transformed it, bending it back without violence, without destruction, yet with complete control. The core of the darkness coalesced into a monstrous shape, a figure both terrifying and familiar, with shadows of the past, the betrayal, and the fear he had carried for so long. Its voice echoed in his mind, cold and accusing. "You are weak, you were rejected, your bloodline is cursed, and your children will never rise." The Alpha King's heart pounded, but he did not falter. He looked at the Omega, who met his gaze steadily. "It lies," she said softly. "Its power is strong, but it has no hold over the love you carry, the bond you share, or the strength of your family." He felt her words ignite something inside him, a fire tempered by patience and trust. He lifted the twins higher, as if offering them to the sky itself, and roared, a sound that shook the shadows. His voice carried command, defiance, and love, all in one. The curse recoiled, twisting violently, but it did not break. The Omega joined him, hands reaching out to guide the energy. Together, they became a force of harmony and balance. Him, raw strength transformed by purpose. Her, calm power shaped by wisdom. The shadows screamed, writhing, twisting, and finally, with a final surge of light and sound, dispersed into nothingness. The forest grew still. The twins slept again, unharmed, their breaths soft and even. The Alpha King lowered them gently, feeling a sense of peace he had not known since before the betrayal, before the exile. He turned to the Omega, his amber eyes reflecting awe and gratitude. "You saved them," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "You saved me too." She shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "We saved each other. You have always been strong, but now you understand what it truly means to protect, to trust, to love." For a long moment they stood together in silence, the weight of the battle settling around them. The Alpha King realized something that had been buried beneath pride and anger for years. He did not need to bear the world alone. He had found an equal, a partner, a bond forged not in crowns or armies, but in shared purpose and hearts intertwined. As the sun rose higher, warming the frost-kissed forest, the Alpha King spoke again, softer this time. "I was rejected, cast out, believed unworthy. But now I see what matters. My children, you, and the life we can build together." The Omega's hand brushed against his, and he did not pull away. "And that life begins here," she said. "Not in a throne, not in a kingdom, but in trust, love, and family. That is power the curse cannot touch." He nodded, a smile breaking across his face for the first time in months. The forest around them seemed to breathe with relief, as though it too recognized the victory, not over the curse, but over fear, pride, and isolation. The Alpha King knelt beside the twins, holding them close. "We will rise together," he whispered. "No matter what comes next, we will rise." The Omega knelt beside him, her hand resting on the twins, her presence a steady anchor. "And you will never face it alone again," she said. The warmth of the fire, the fragile peace of the forest, and the presence of the Omega brought a sense of renewal that was almost sacred. The Alpha King had learned that true power was not in dominion, nor in fear, nor in the crown he had once worn. It was in connection, in trust, and in the willingness to stand beside someone who would not yield. As the day unfolded, they prepared to leave the clearing, knowing that the world outside the forest would never be kind. Yet the Alpha King no longer felt fear. The trials they had faced had forged him anew. The twins were safe, the Omega was beside him, and together they would meet whatever challenges came next. Before they stepped into the wider world, the Alpha King paused, looking at the forest one last time. Shadows lingered still, but they were not threats. They were reminders of what had been overcome, of the strength born in exile and struggle. He breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of the land, the rhythm of the life they had saved, and the promise of a future they would shape together. Turning to the Omega, he said quietly, almost reverently, "Whatever comes, we face it together. You, me, and them. Always." She met his gaze, eyes steady, lips curving into a soft smile. "Always," she echoed. And as they walked forward, the twins between them, the sun casting golden light across their path, the forest seemed to whisper a blessing. The Alpha King, once rejected, now found redemption not in a crown or a kingdom, but in love, trust, and the family he had fought so hard to protect. The curse had tested them, threatened them, and revealed the depths of fear and doubt, but it had also shown them the power of unity, the strength of hearts intertwined, and the hope that even in exile, even in darkness, a new dawn could rise. The Alpha King carried his children, the Omega, beside him, and for the first time in a lifetime, he walked not as a king alone, but as part of a bond unbreakable, ready to face the world, whatever it might bring, with courage, wisdom, and love. The forest fell silent, the whispers fading, as if the shadows themselves had paused to honor what had been achieved. A new chapter had begun, not written in crowns or bloodlines, but in trust, resilience, and the quiet power of hearts that had found each other in the cold. And somewhere, far beyond the trees, the first hints of light promised that even the harshest winter could not last forever, and even the darkest curse could be overcome when love and courage stood together.